in just a short time, you had an apartment. And how much you paid, if you paid anything, depended upon how much you earned. And if you might also remember that there was something called health care. There was county health care. You went, if you didn't have money, you didn't have health insurance, you didn't have your own doctor, you went to the county hospital. And regardless of how much money you had, or whether you had a job or any money at all, you got taken care of. Then there was something called employment. Remember that? Where if there was 3% unemployment, it was considered horrible. And there were jobs, and there was training, and there was something called the EDD, which not only paid you money if you were unemployed, but found you a job. They had a list, they had a system, and they got you placed. And there was something called Social Security and disability for people who couldn't make it, who were injured, and you could actually get on it by going down and signing up. Now, if you go down and sign up, well, you wait for a year, and then of course you are denied, because that's the approach. And there was something called prisons that were for the bad people. Now, I bet there's no one here who doesn't know somebody who either is in or has just gotten out of prison. Because I think the percentages of people who are in prison now, like 1 in 5 at least, are either in prison or have been in prison. And if you break that down by racial minorities, you just, it's crazy. It is just crazy. Now, we used to have, we had mental health facilities. And if they weren't in state hospitals for the really badly off people, they were in communities. And you know, if you really needed help, you just went to the mental health. What happened to that? What happened to all that? And what is the consequence of the dissolving of those services? It is people on the streets. If you think back a bit, you probably recall being surprised when you saw somebody out on the street at night who was sleeping in a doorway or under a coat. It was unusual, and there was somebody you could call and say, gee, there's somebody out here who needs some help. Forget that. Now, you can't walk down any major street in any neighborhood and not find somebody who's sleeping outdoors, and not only sleeping outdoors that night, but living outdoors. And in this town, now I'm getting to safe ground. In this town, just a few years ago, for some reason, the guard was let down, and people who had been sleeping outdoors on the American River or in vacant lots came together behind the smud plant, behind the almond growers, and it became a visible community. And if those of you who managed to get out there saw it, what you would have seen were people who had set up not just tents, but who had constructed little cabins with little picket fences and little walkways, and they were helping each other and waving to their neighbors and taking care of their dogs and cooking community meals together. It was incredible. And there were, at the high point, before the crash, before the dissolution, before the destruction, there were at least 400 people living out there, so that Oprah and her crew came and made it a national story. And as soon as Sacramento's tent city hit the national news, what we had here was not, oh, can we provide housing? Oh, can we help you? What we had is, you are going to jail unless you get out of here. And the stuff was taken and seized and destroyed. Tents, sleeping bags, food, utensils, personal possessions, just gone. And what happened to those people? They didn't disappear. If they weren't in jail, they were still there, but they were dispersed. And that's the start of Safe Ground. Because what was clear was, people need a place to be. People need a place to be. And what we, as Safe Ground, and the activists here, and the lawyers, and the contributors, and the supporters have tried to do is convince the city and the county that what they need to do is designate some area where homeless people can be and put their stuff and not have to drag it around like snails with their houses with them. Just leave the stuff so that they can deal with the other issues in their lives, whether that's dealing with their health care or their employment or their family or whatever needs they have. But you can't do it when everything you own that you need to survive you're dragging around. So Safe Ground has been on this campaign to get some place where we can give protection and security to homeless people who can form a community and get things done for themselves with some assistance. Now, that being the basic, simple thing that we're trying to achieve, the city and the county have come back to us with the horror story. That is, well, you can't really be legally on public or private property under our ordinances. So unless you come to us and we tell you what is acceptable to us, you're going to be either in jail or somewhere else. So the question is, what does the city want us to do? Well, they want us to not just have a place where people can be, but have some kind of accommodations that meet the city building code. Well, that means you're building houses. So how can you build houses for homeless people without the money, without the public support? You can't. What we want to do is build something that is basic, that will at least get the green light from them, which means a pretty basic cabin just to stabilize people. But we're still fighting with the city just to get a place to be, a piece of ground. And that's why we need people to be educated, informed, and then come out and support us. Because we will eventually get a piece of property and say, this is it, we're going to do it, we're going to construct something here for people to come in, not to spend the rest of their lives, but to come in to get the help they need, to get themselves together and move on, and then maybe help others do the same thing. Oh, yeah. In Portland, Dignity Village, for the last 11 years, has been doing precisely this, and thousands of homeless people have cycled through and gone on other things, and that's what we need. We need that base. But when we come to the city council and say, this is what we want, we're going to put out the call and say, if you support Safe Ground, come there, tell those city council people that they've got to accept what we want. And in the meantime, before we can get that community up and running, they have to allow people to camp there. They are drawing the line, you know, no tents. Well, you don't go from sleeping in the gutter, from sleeping under the bushes, to living in a cabin. There is a transition point. We need to both have the place and then give them some kind of temporary cover before we get those cabins. So when the call goes out, come to city council, make noise, get up there, speak, and support us. And thank you very much for doing what you're doing. Thank you.